Awesome. Okay, well, welcome. I'm so excited to have Karden with us today. This is Hope Ropes. This is really just a place where you can hear stories of hope, healing, transformation, recovery. I invite you to just get comfortable, listen with an open heart always and an open mind, and grab onto the hope ropes because I'm sure there will be many, and learn to borrow belief from those who've gone before you, just like
Mm,
Karden. So,
mm,
welcome,
mm.
Karden. Those of you who are watching or listening, you may know Karden from Instagram, from his brilliant posts, which are, oh, they always
That you're
come.
lovely enough to share with quite frequency. I appreciate that.
I mean, they always come at the right moment and they're always what we need to hear. And he is just an expert in all things mind body. You call yourself a nervous system medicine practitioner, and I love that. And
Yes.
you're also the co-creator of SOMIA International, the HEAL program, which I have personally tried, which was CFS school, and have recently co-authored this incredible book, The Secret Language of the Body, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But I'm so excited to just have you here and talk about all things nervous system and mind body, and really just give maybe some hope, right? Give that hope rope to someone who's watching.
Yeah.
So yeah, so welcome. It's nice to have you here.
Very happy to be with you. Next time we got to somehow find it to do it in person. Either you're going to come down to the Berkshires or I'll come up there.
Yeah, I would love that. I have an extra room ready for you, Carden.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, so I'm sure you're probably sick of telling your story over and over again, but I think it'd be great to just hear a glimpse into your story because I know you dealt with chronic symptoms as well. Like, what got you to this place of mind body expert? So maybe Cole's Notes version.
Yeah. Okay. So getting to the point of mind body expert had to basically go through a huge amount of mind body suffering.
Always the case. Yeah.
I've actually I used to joke back in my pre-nervous system days, but in my like body worker and yoga days, that don't ever learn yoga from someone who has never had a trouble moving, right?
Mm,
Like who is someone who has always been able to touch their toes to teach my tight ass male body that can't get past his thighs to touch his toes,
yeah,
right?
I
So
hear that.
like speaking of hope ropes, right? I really we want to learn from people whose experience resonates with ours and who have gone through the suffering to achieve the outcome, because if they didn't have to do that, then they don't know how to get you there,
That makes sense. Total
right?
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the super cliff notes for me is that after college, I decided to go to massage therapy school. I took a real 90 degree from, I guess, I guess law school or Wall Street, which are where as I was supposed to go. And I fell in love with all things body work, all things structure of the body, function of the body, movement of the body. And I built a really great career out of helping people get out of pain through every variety of body work you could imagine. I had a wonderful integrative wellness center called Boundless, where I had other body workers, acupuncturists, osteopaths, etc., on staff. And I really did pride myself and us on all these non-medical, right, non-conventional solutions to helping people, all of which are very helpful. But there were two things going on. One is that with some clients, we were very successful. And with other clients, regardless of how well the work was done or how compliant they were with their stretches or their strengthening practice or their yada yada or wearing their Vivo barefoot shoes or, whatever, okay, or how many times they went to Pilates and had a powerhouse made of 100 abdominal muscles and steel, they were still in pain. Um, And this was very frustrating to me because I'm obsessed with outcomes and I thought I was good at what I was doing. More frustrating, though, was that my low back pain was getting more frequent, more intense, and more disabling every year. which was scary, humbling, and humiliating. And it was, let's see, I'm going to go with, I've been in practice since 2007. So like 18 years, something like that, 17 years. And it was around 7 years ago that my back pain, like just peak uninterrupted agony for many months. And when I talk about peak uninterrupted agony, I mean just incredible pain in my low back, but that wasn't just it. I also had iliotibial band syndrome. I had what I call ice picks, bilateral ice picks that stabbed me in the outside of my calves all the time, and I'd like my knees would buckle and I'd fall to the ground. Um, and I also would have like static electrical pain, like bad pain that would sometimes ricochet around my groin and pelvis. And it was awful, right? And it was always evolving, and everything I was doing wasn't working. And um, I'll keep it brief because there's someone I can make the long version, the short version. Um, but while I was in the midst of this agony, I stumbled into on my friend's bookshelf this book by Dr. Sarno.
I had it here as
Yay!
well. Yep.
Called Healing Back Pain, which is the thickness of my index finger, folks. Okay. And I do think I love telling this part of the story because I have a healthy opinion of myself. I always have. And I was an expert, right, in this stuff. And so I saw this little dinky book on my friend's bookshelf, and I gave it the biggest eye roll in the world, Vanessa. I was just like, come on. What could this? And also because it has this picture of like a ripped back with a towel over it, right?
Looks like a soft core something.
Yeah. Either this is going to be some strange softcore porn, or it's going to like
Yeah.
teach me some exercises from the 70s that are useless. But fate and the angels and those who are looking after us work in mysterious ways. And I had to go to the bathroom, and I needed reading material, Vanessa. I can't be bored on, when you go in there and you don't have anything, you like read the back of the Lysol can, right?
Yeah.
Oh, right, Jesus.
Amazing. Amazing.
And so I bring this book with me, and instead of having softcore porn exercises or whatever, it starts describing a personality type.
Yep.
Type A, perfectionist, achievement, putting your own needs second, other people first, et cetera, et cetera. And so besides it mapping on very well to my constitution, he then goes on in a very clear and methodical way to explain really the Swiss cheese, all the absurd holes in the conventional orthopedic and diagnostic model of chronic pain. That like basically, guys, just so you know, like most of the reasons, whether it be misalignments, herniated discs, mild amounts of arthritis, or what, all these reasons really don't hold water to explain most pain presentations. And as a body worker and functional movement guy who'd been trained in that, when Jen Mann started poking holes in it, again, I'm not dogmatic. I'm a very curious, open-minded learner and thinker. And I was like, oh, you know what? He's right. That doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. I know the person who taught me that hip alignment does X, Y, and Z had a really good argument, but like when I see John's argument, that guy's argument sounds like it sucks. And also, if that guy's argument was right, then everyone with hip imbalance should be in pain. Everyone with some rotation should have iliotibial band syndrome. Everyone with a herniation should have X, Y, and Z groin pain, but they flippin' don't.
They don't.
They don't. And so this book, in that one moment of being on the commode and reading this, my life changed forever in a couple of ways. One is within a couple of days of reading the book, I was one of the happy beneficiaries for a period of time of what's called the book cure, where my pain went away for months, which was outstandingly shocking. Okay. I haven't told this part of it in a long time, but I actually stumbled into this book. So I was on Long Island teaching the anatomy and physiology component of a friend's yoga teacher training, which in and of itself was felt hypocritical because of how much pain I was in. But we were down, my wife and I were down there for 4 days to teach, and a day later we were leaving for a 2 week vacation to Europe. And I all I'd been thinking about was how the flight was going to kill me. Sitting in the plane was going to be agonizing. I had strategized the aisle seat, right? I
Hmm.
knew that I was going to get up every like 8 seconds. I had this little like lumbar thing that I was going to bring with me, you know, um, all the fear, all the anxiety. And I read this book, excuse me, and I barely had any pain on the flight,
Wow.
right? I was just like, what is going on here? Especially, well, a big part of it is the book teaches you not to be afraid of your body, right? And another thing about me is I tend to have the gift of if I'm going to learn something, Vanessa, I'm going to learn it somehow like amazingly quick. I'm a in human design. I'm a 5'2" manifesting generator. So like
Okay.
I'm essentially the road runner, right? It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
and my learning happens like that, you know? So I got so but anyway, I'm on this flight and all like weeks of fear and planning gone. And it was one of those moments I'm like I could never go back to the way I practiced before. I was like literally I feel like I've been practicing. A lie is too intensive a word.
Mm.
And it's also not mean or wrong. Like there was nothing wrong with the world of body work, the world of functional movement, the world of mechanically and functionally improving bodies.
Right.
But what is a lie about it? What's a myth? What's a fiction? Which is basically it's no different from the old folks bleeding people to heal
Yes.
them.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that in the bodywork and functional movement space, for the most part, outside of particular instances of, let's say, acute injury, rehab, specific healing, specific like post-operative stuff, right? Like if you break a bone and then you need PT, like that's appropriate, right? But the myth is that all of this stuff has anything to do with pain.
Mm. Yeah.
That's the myth, right? That's the again, to call it a lie would mean that people knew they were lying. They don't know they're lying. They're living inside, the practitioners are living inside a system that's wrong. That
Misinformed,
has
right?
incorrect premises,
Misinformation. Yeah. That,
right?
yeah, I hear
And
that.
so I could not go back to that. And that we can go so much further. I'll simply say that was my entry point. The book here didn't last. Sarno's theories are remarkable, but they're not up to date. And it is more complicated than that. And it requires a huge amount of embodiment, somatics, emotional concepts. And that moved me in the direction of becoming a somatic experiencing practitioner, and lots of other things. And I call myself a nervous system medicine practitioner because I specifically use this blend of work to help people get out of pain and disease, right? So am I a somatic experiencing trauma therapist? Yes. Do I work the trauma? Yes, but only usually in service of healing physical and illness types disorders. So that's where that kind of concept comes from.
Wow, that is such a journey. It's crazy because I feel like everyone has their moment of when they discovered Dr. Sarno,
Yes.
right? Like, I don't know if you've noticed that. I've heard some like, and then I discovered this book. For me, it was I discovered it on the actual full audio book that, sounds like it's really old and dated.
You
On
mean you had tapes?
Yeah, the tapes. So basically the tapes somehow recorded onto there. And I just discovered it on YouTube after doing DNRS. And that did help some of my nervous system stuff, but then the pain got louder. Like
Mm.
louder. We're talking like maybe it was as a 6 during the whole thing. And the DNRS helped some of the POTS, to help the POTS. It did really help me understand what was happening, but it accentuated the pain because I was repressing and pushing and redirecting. And then it was building and building and building. And I had no idea, because they tell you, elevate, elevate, elevate your emotional state. No, no, no. Don't go to the grief. Don't go to the anger. Don't go to the anything. And so there was even stronger coupling of fear with emotion. And so then the pain got louder, like 10, right? At 26 migraines a month, right? It was chronic.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Am
Yeah.
I
And
allowed
I
to
was
curse on this
on,
podcast? If so, I apologize. If not, I
no,
apologize.
you can go ahead. But yeah, it was so chronic and so painful. We're like 10 to 10, I wanted to chop my head off. That is how it felt. And I discovered, again, just by fluke, Sarno's work. And I listened just like you. And I was like, oh my God, that's me. It made
Mm,
sense. And that's my beginning, the journey of starting to see what was under the pain, building safety with emotion, getting to know the whole actual mind body system. And obviously that advanced in like curable and somatic work, but
wow.
that's kind of where it started. And I think it's such an amazing example that you gave of coming from this background of so much training, so much experience, and then leading people, to do this type of work because that's all you knew. And then having this moment where everything is shaken, everything you knew now is like you're seeing it differently. And that's
Hmm.
it's like seeing everything for the first time again,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Yeah.
exactly
So
right.
yeah, it's your story is amazing, and I know that you are bringing so much hope to so many people who are, dealing with kind of chronic pain and chronic symptoms, right?
You just made me realize something though. Like I had a holy craptacular moment while you were talking that you didn't know about, but I need to share now.
Yes.
It was quite tangential, but so full disclosure, folks, Karden Rabin has never done a brain retraining program.
Hey, I
Really,
did not know that.
zero, none. That's the wheelhouse of my lovely, better looking partner. All right. But, but, and I'd always had this intuition, but this is the part you just had let me connect with. I don't know if you know about it or have done it, Vanessa, or your listeners, but for about a 4 year concentrated period of time, I did a lot of the Landmark Forum.
Okay, I did not.
Okay.
I don't
Have you
even
heard of it?
I have heard of it, but can you share a little bit more about it,
Okay.
because I don't
And,
know
and
much.
and this is not to advocate for the Landmark Forum, but this is to, in retrospect, why I understand brain retraining. Because in almost all ways, the Landmark Forum is a vestige of Werner Erhardt's Est, which was Erhardt Senmar trainings, and there's a crap ton of mixed opinion about Landmark. But needless to say, Landmark is this highly intensive kind of a cyclone, you don't even realize why you're doing it, of brain retraining, of getting these massive epiphanal moments of seeing how the thought structures and language structures of your mind are 100% creating your reality.
Mm,
And
okay.
um, it's it's really amazing. But basically, the premise of it is that you can create any possibility you want. And, if basically, let's say you're stuck on something like being really hurt by, being really hurt by like what your partner said to you, right? You could create the possibility of being unmessable with, right? Of like just simply no, like I'm going to feel empowered and amazing and not let this hit me. And they have this magic sauce of like making that stick for periods of time. All right. And so when I heard about brain retraining, I was like, it was different, but I'm like, I think I get this. I think through Landmark, I have been consistently, whenever I have a thought that isn't helpful, a
Yeah.
thought that isn't empowering, a thought that isn't expansive, a thought that isn't transcendent, a thought that doesn't mean I'm born invincible, right?
Yeah.
Or if I'm ever feeling down, if I'm ever feeling defeated,
Yeah.
it's on me, like landmark, because it's you, right? And you can change that. And so that's landmark. But where what you made me realize, uh, Vanessa, when you shared about DNRS before John Sarno's book, my chronic pain got exponentially worse during and after landmark
Look at that.
because I was basically dosing,
Yes.
right?
Isn't that interesting?
Right.
Haha.
I never went to Landmark for most people don't no one people don't go to Landmark usually for health issues. They go to Landmark for performance issues,
Right.
for relational issues, for psychological, but it's still all feeling issues, right? And
Mhm.
they teach you how to use, basically the whip, the sledgehammer of cognition, right?
Yep.
Of neurolinguistics
Yep.
to not be that way. But it
Wow.
comes at the exclusive consequence of repression, right? So you just made me see for the first time ever that landmark was one of the greatest exasperators of my pain. Never saw that till this conversation, Vanessa. And you may know from one of my reels, which is old, it's like DNRS versus CFS school. I
Yes.
really got up on my soapbox and I let DNRS have it because I hate it because of what it does to people, like what it did to you, right? 26 migraines a month. So thank you for letting me have that moment. I hope some of your listeners find that little landmark tangent useful, but that was amazing for me.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, right? Like how even this far into the game, into the journey, I don't want to call it a game, but we have these epiphanies, right? Where it starts, it's still making sense. Like
Yeah.
it's still making sense. And I will say, like for myself, like again, DNRS is a brain retraining, is top down only. And although it has benefits, it clearly doesn't have it all, right? We know that,
Correct.
right? It literally touches on one part, and it does have the side effect of repressing a lot. And so I've actually had to, funny enough, because in DNRS you incrementally train towards like your fears, towards whatever it might be. I've had to incrementally help people incrementally train towards letting go of DNRS,
Yeah.
letting go of the need to always elevate, to avoid everything that's uncomfortable, to push aside the negative emotion. There's no negative, they're all emotions. And if
Right.
we cut out a portion of them, we're cutting out all of the experience. We're changing our entire experience. And so yeah, it's funny. I've had to like wean people off of the
You
DNRS.
had to put people in the DNRS 12 step.
Yeah, basically, right? And then, bring them to something more holistic, like heal,
Yeah.
like there's so many beautiful programs out there. And this is a perfect segue to your book because we
Mm,
have, the secret language of the body over here. And I have these beautiful tabs because there's
so
so
lovely.
many aha moments in here, even for myself who has been at this for a while. And what I loved is that it was just, first of all, it's a brilliant read. You and Jen did such a great job, and I can see not only your brilliance in it, your minds, your what you've learned from an academic standpoint, but I also see your hearts in it. Like I see,
Mm,
it's like you guys have a desire to
mm,
help heal the world,
mm,
right? I always say we're
mhm.
healing people one nervous system at a time. That's how we're
Yeah.
healing the world, right?
Yep.
And so it's I mean it touches on, I would say it touches on everything pretty much. Like when you're talking about, from the actual understanding of nervous system dysregulation and trauma, all the way to attachment and inner child. I mean, there's practices in there, there's somatic practices, connecting with yourself, true self, all of these beautiful ways. And what I love about it is it's kind of a program in a book,
Mhm.
right? For those who can't, afford
For
to
for
do.
those for those who accuse me of being uh, a profiteer of human suffering, right? One of the things that happens in this space is, you create programs and you sell them, right? And you're selling them to people who need help. But a lot of those people are kind of angry at the system, right? And so I'd
Oh
love that you call it a
yeah.
program in the book because like I like to think it's like, yes, I have a program and we sell it for a price. And but we also wrote a book that costs less than $20, or you can probably ask your public library to acquire it, and then it can be free. Like, we really do want to get this out there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what I really appreciate so much, because I mean, I get people coming to me all the time for coaching, for consulting, and just saying like, I can't afford anything. Where can I start? And so, I mean, since your book came out, like that's, where
Yay!
right? That's
Yay!
resources.
This is where you start, y'all.
I mean, it's affordable. I have family reading it, cousins reading it, and they're like,
Oh, isn't it? It's also that nice way of like, people always ask, how do you get people into this work? Or
yeah,
and you're just like, you know what? Slide them the book, the
yeah,
nice passive aggressive gift.
exactly,
I
right?
got you
And
this,
it's
honey.
sticking, right? They're building an awareness with it, and
Yeah.
that's the key. So like, even if they don't implement the whole thing right now, their seeds are being planted, and they're opening their minds to something else.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing. And what I really appreciate is how digestible it is.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of books out there, and I appreciate them. There's some that are very, very well written. But I will say that this was written in a way that we can digest, where we can pause in between sections and chapters. And I just wanted to say I really appreciated it. And I'm trying to get my husband to read it as well. Uh,
Oh,
because I'm going
yay.
to leave it in the bathroom. I'm
Yeah.
going to leave
Oh,
it in the bathroom for
yes,
him.
do that. Yep. Take away his phone, leave it
Yes,
in the bathroom, right?
exactly.
Um,
So yeah, it's so
Well, that
just,
was
yeah.
so kind of you to say about the book. You're making my tail feathers shake, as my wife would say, because you're hitting all the hopes that we had for the book on the head. And um, I think you might know this, um, but again, the book the book wanted to be in the world, and the reason why I say that is uh, I'm a person who half my life is what I call at cause, right? It's I pursue things, I seize opportunities, I work my butt off. But really, the other half and all the most important bits, have been fate and the universe working in the way it wants, right? And I'm its instrument. Jen and I had got brought together to do our thing. We were doing our program. But HarperCollins asked us. We didn't pitch a book,
Yeah.
right? No one, we didn't have a manuscript that we were going around with. HarperCollins asked us, and then we said yes. And then they said, great, we need the book in 100 days.
Ooh,
So,
yeah.
so again, Roadrunner, 5'2" manifesting generator. I was just like, sure, give me 10 years or 100 days.
I'll
We'll get
do
it
it.
done. And then
Yeah.
again, moreover, like the fact, like it just flowed right out of Jen and I,
I mean,
right?
you
Like
guys
it was
were ready, right? It was ready. It was already there, and it had the opportunity to be released onto paper. And
like
actually
this,
remember having a conversation. I met Jen in Greece, not this summer,
right?
but the summer before. And we
Just
sat
before.
down for lunch, and she's like, Vanessa, I'm so excited. I'm gonna tell you, but like, don't tell anyone yet. And it was just, I was so elated in that moment and excited. I'm like, I can't wait. I can't wait.
Mm,
I knew this was going to be good. And it is. I mean, it did not disappoint.
yay!
If you're watching, do yourself a favor, get this book. If you have Spotify, you can listen to it, any of the streaming, like it's definitely it should be in your nervous system library, is my point.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, so I want to get into some questions I feel like a lot of people are asking in the community. But from your perspective, what is the biggest inhibitor to someone healing mind body symptoms? Like, what do you see most commonly that's keeping people stuck?
Okay, my question is this someone who's in the work or not in the work?
Is someone who's in the work.
Okay, great. In the work.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. Where I've been getting to lately, and uh, I'm actually this is the next thing I want to teach, is the shortest answer is fear.
Mhm.
But it's not as it's more elemental than that. So what I mean is that unfelt fear, um, literally we're a puppet to it, right? Unfelt fear will sneak, it dominates the mind in terms of overthinking, constant thinking. Like we talk about fight flight energy, we talk about sympathetic energy, but most of the disorganized sympathetic energy that's making people be catastrophize, overthink, all those sorts of things is rooted in unfelt fear and unmetabolized flight energy that's related to fear. Um, the inability when you don't believe in the work, right?
Mhm.
When you're having difficulty in belief and you've listened to all these stories and you've got a lot of hope ropes, okay? The thing that's stopping that is fear. When you are when you're we just talked about the sympathetic state with the overthink, right? Or the doubt. When you're in hopelessness, when you're in dorsal shutdown, there are lots of vulnerable emotions over there, but there's a shit ton of fear.
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then not only is fear afraid of the world, fear is the main thing that's the barrier between you and the painful interior emotions like grief that
Mm.
you can't deal with. Okay. So it's fear, it's fear, it's fear. And I'll say it again, it's fear. But what I'm stumbling into recently, and this is what I've been teaching to my private clients, and I'm going to be doing a fear master class, a somatic fear master class soon, because it's such
Can't
a
wait.
void in this space,
Yeah.
is that if we don't have, this is my second part of my kind of uh, soapbox here, is that you've heard me say this, Vanessa, there is the yin and yang of safety. And
Yes.
so most people think of safety just from the yin perspective, which could also be classified as the feminine perspective. It's the embrace. It's the I've got you. It's the I love you. It's oh the boo-boo's okay. It's I see you. It's actually, by the way, what's developmentally first, okay, meaning like conception
Yep.
through five,
Yep.
okay, and it's primary, and you need yin safety to build off of to create then what I call yang safety, which is not rooted in embrace. It's rooted in power.
Mm.
Okay. And power is what we develop largely from five onwards through adolescence, where we if you are a parent, you've seen you felt it in your own body, but you've seen it in your children when they've conquered a fear,
Yeah.
when they look at the balance beam, or simply put, when my girl will arrive at a party and she's socially anxious, there's like some kind of like bouncy house that she's into, but she's not sure. She watches for a while, right? She moves over hesitantly. And then there's this barrier of fear and anxiety. That's appropriate because it's
Mhm.
cautious. And then her little lovely energetic 5-year-old body, her excitement exceeds her fear and she pushes through. And then all of a sudden she's having fun and bouncing,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
That is an example, guys, of power. Power has a very bad rap in the society because it's associated with patriarchy and oppression. That's not power, that's force.
I love that. Yeah.
People with large amounts of personal power have very little need for force. So where I'm getting at is that a lot of folks may have tried to address their fear in all sorts of ways and mostly yin ways. But if the yin way is not coupled with yang ways, with somatic felt experiences of power, which
Hmm.
by the way, also feel like thrill. They feel
Hmm.
like without someone having to be submitting, they feel like dominance. We're a mammal, okay? We have to have the experience of victory over threat.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's the short. It's fear, and usually what I'm now realizing for most people, because most people have access to the yin techniques,
Yep.
it's the absence of the yang techniques. And so when I lead the somatic masterclass, it's going to be on piping people into their somatic and energetic sense of their own power. Um, and it's important.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it's actually something that actually I've been doing in my own practice, just and I'll
Ooh,
explain as just even as a Christian too, as my faith. I know that I have a particular authority, right? Authority that's been given to me as a child of God. And so that has always been coupled with that compassionate, attentive, and that's what I teach my clients as well is, well, we have authority over that, right?
right.
We have
Yeah.
choice. We can do these things. And also moving, I think one of the biggest helpers for me as well from a somatic perspective, you say, connecting to that sense of empowerment, right? Is I do this beautiful somatic practice of moving with fear, right? And moving with anger. And we resource with positions and postures that help us feel powerful.
Yeah.
Like I can feel it even through my work. I remember working with a parts therapist, and fear kept coming up. And so we built the resource of like my muscles, my
Hell yeah.
biceps, or a connection to that power within me. And so when I would feel that fear, obviously I would tend to it, witness it, recognize it, but then I would access it, right? The power, that power part, that true self that has authority. So I think this masterclass is going to be incredible. I can't
Well,
wait.
but that you're teaching it already, and it comes through. Like another word for it, you can just see it in your Instagram. Is it's swagger. It's really
Yeah,
positive swagger, right?
yeah, yeah,
And that's really important. That authority,
yeah.
and uh, and so again, just to be very practical here for the listeners, if you are stuck in a fear cycle and you can't get out of it with parts work or your child or head stuff, I'm going to direct you to what Vanessa just talked about, like move with power. Just focus 10 minutes on pure physical forms of strength,
Yes,
and that will start stabilizing the rest of the content,
yes. And
including making your head more useful.
yeah, and I will add too that one of the biggest I guess the most impactful things, right, that went along with all the things I did was movement, exercise, building power in my body again. And so you might say I'm bedbound and I can't move. I started off with these little resistance bands from Amazon, and I did them in my bed because I needed to know that my legs had power. I needed to know that.
Mm.
And I started to slowly build with training, with exercise again. And not from a place of like, I have to lose weight or whatever. It was always power, always.
The
And
nervous system
yeah,
loves
yeah, exactly. So we'll
power.
wrap that little section off. But I think that was awesome. I love
But
that.
and just so you know, your intuition to do even the small bands, in somatic experiencing, especially when you see Peter Levine, the founder, work,
Yep.
he uses such tiny stimuli to elicit what he's trying to get. Like so to elicit power, it'll be something as simple as like let's just touch our hands together.
Yeah.
And all I want you to do, Vanessa, is move my hand away from you. Eh, That's simple. Just like move my
Yes.
hand away. And then you'll be like, notice that. How does your body respond to that? That you were able to push my hand away. Power, mobilization,
Yes.
agency, all right there.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that. Yes, this is an empowering talk. So if anyone's listening, this is the beginning of connecting to the power that's already within you. It's there.
Yeah, thank you, Chasmith. Right there.
All right. So let's talk about a little bit about grief.
Mm.
And so this is a near and dear to my heart. And I know after reading your book, I didn't know this about you, but you had the loss of your mom. Um, you know, like as a young person, as a young adult, right? I think it was, how old were you at that time?
I was 21. I was a senior in college.
Okay, so very much still a child. We're always a child, right? But I think that from my experience with loss, I know that that was like part of the catalyst for what I've experienced. And grief is something that's so universal. And I think that's why I'm so called to it, because we all experience loss to some degree on this journey, like the loss of, years in pain, struggle, loss of relationships, loss of people. And it is so unifying in that I don't see it really talked about as much in this community. But what's interesting is that, I've worked with hundreds one-on-one in over, 4.5 years here. And what I'm finding and it's not all cases, but that grief was very much a catalyst for a lot of the mind body symptoms. And yet, it's not really talked about as much. And so I felt like I really want to start bringing, giving grief the attention it deserves and desires, so that we can see that it's a part of the healing. It's not something that we have to DNRS away, right? Or avoid or push, but that it can be held as we heal, right? We can move with it. And so I wanted to kind of know, if you feel okay sharing your experience with grief, and maybe even what you've seen as a practitioner.
No, I'm going to ask you a question instead.
Okay, yes.
Did you need to cultivate access or have a relationship to your own power, as we just talked about, before you started to work well with grief?
So building safety with grief was key, because it terrified me. So there's that fear,
Right.
right? Because again, we have stories associated with grief and also emotions that we may not always experience as much. Like when you've had a loss, I always say every emotion is heightened, every emotion. And it's very, it's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to feel it. And so, yes, I had to slowly start cultivating safety with grief. And that was like in a titrated way. It was like, can I feel it? And can I access safety here?
And how
Can I,
much of this work did you do on your own versus with someone or community or group
good
or church?
question. I I'm a bereavement. Okay, so I went to school during my whole 10 years of chronic illness. I went back to school and studied grief and trauma, became a bereavement educator, certified counselor. Like I knew everything about grief, so to speak. I knew nothing. When it came down to it, it felt like I knew nothing. I knew about ceremonies and cultures and what grief might look like and how it may show up. But at the end of the day, I didn't know how to sit with it. I had no clue. And that process started to unfold organically by, again, working with a therapist, reading from, some of the experts in the field, connecting with others, community, and starting to build that. And so I, I, what I kind of learned is that we have to learn. Grieving is learning. For some reason, because our society is very much grief avoidant, we don't learn. Maybe back in the day, we all grieved together. We grieved in communities, right? No one grieved alone. There was ceremony, there was everything, that connects you. And now there's like, you get 5 days off of work. Good luck,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
And like, let's not talk about it again. Let's not bring it up. And so it was unlearning and learning, building
Yeah.
safety, accessing resources.
Yeah.
That's
Wonderful.
my spiel.
No, I asked you the questions because um, in my heart, or and we'll get to that, constitutionally, my obsession is with the physics that govern the physical laws that govern human beings, spiritually, neurologically, right? And there is a physics, meaning there are these consistent laws, rules that have very predictable outcomes, right? So like, there's a physics to ruptured attachment,
Mhm.
right? There's a physics to how the perception of fear in the brain and body will impact the polyvagal hierarchy,
Mhm.
and then a very clear presentation, although it can be uh, uh, multifaceted, a very clear presentation of symptoms. So the physics are actually very consistent. They're very simple. The way they present in terms of symptoms, personalities, personal histories, stories, and experiences are limitless, but they're all built on the same physics in the way that like Newton's laws of gravity explain everything from, a home run in baseball to how galaxies swirl around, right? But they're really just a couple of simple laws.
Yeah.
So the reason why I put it back on you before I talk about my own experience is that we deploy the same survival responses to our internal emotional threats
Yep.
as we do to our external environmental threats. Meaning, so in the external environment, you deploy the same survival responses to uh, an overdue bill when they're going to say we're going to turn off your power, okay, to your house, as you do to um, your an abusive spouse, right? Like these are the external things. The exact same thing happens for overwhelming, awful, and threatening internal emotional experiences. Grief being probably uh, top three final bosses, okay, of internal threat that elicits terror.
Yep.
And worse yet, because it's inside of you. And you usually feel these things when you're very young. If dad is coming after you with a belt, okay, even when you're young, it's terrifying, but like you at least can run. You could theoretically throw a bottle back at him. There's like some logic to the fight flight response there.
Mhm.
Okay? How do you do that with your internalized experience of grief? You're feeling the terror of it, but it's in you. You can't possibly escape it or attack it. None of your none of your survival mechanisms work. So then instead, the only thing available to you is repression.
Mhm. Yep.
Repression to such a degree that you authentically, without it, you would swear it on a stack of Bibles in front of Jesus. I don't have any grief in me.
Hmm.
Because that's how well and how ironclad the internal defense had to become, because there was no escaping or surviving it. So then to continue with our physics, even when grief is it's an explicit, conscious, aware process of a culture, like when we hear about native cultures or traditional cultures that actually have intact systems around grief, grief was still a hard thing to deal with and was always done in some kind of intentional community ritual. So it took intention, community, and process, even in the most aware communities around grief. So now you have ours,
Yeah.
where individualistically, each one of us have built up an iron sarcophagus around the grief such that it doesn't exist as far as we're concerned.
Yeah.
And then we have a grief unconscious culture and no ritual containers of any kind to hold it on. And I'm going to get very specific here because you brought up the death of my mom. Um, uh, I'm a non-practicing Jew. And so when someone in their family dies, they do something called Shiva. They sit Shiva. It's supposed to be an intentional container for grief.
Yeah.
And during that time, at least superficially, you're at usually a friend's home, or you cover the mirror so you're not seeing yourself. People bring you food, they bring you gifts, they sit with you, okay? Um, and in so many ways, it's like, wow, the Jewish tradition created a really nice system for this. Yeah, but which is like so many forms of religion today, they miss the forest for the trees, the original teachings, the original intent, the original ritual, the original energy, the original holding is gone, right? And we see this in all traditions. Um, and so it's going through the motions, but it had zero effect. And I remember being in this experience of Shiva. I can access more of the grief now than I could then. And my only job during those 7 days was to keep my shit together and take care of the people that came to take care of me.
Mm.
Right? Like, had you shown up, Vanessa, to see how I was doing, I would have been like, thanks so much for coming, Vanessa. It's so kind of you. Are you okay? Do you want to talk about Samantha with me? And I didn't know any different. I had already bottled up and I was in shock anyway. I was in shock. I couldn't feel. And so my job was to do what I'd always job, which is to make everyone around me happy. And so the one sitting Shiva becomes the caretaker. There's no container for them to collapse into. There's no space for grief.
Mm.
Sorry, I'm experiencing too much content right now of my own, which is okay. Just one sec.
Okay, pause, take a minute.
I'm just working with my mind and my body and my heart to like
Do what
to
you need.
just acknowledge what's going on and to also say like I'm gonna hold some sacred space, not only for this, but like with some people for this. Because it's really when if you ever do get into your deep grief, there's like a tragic, sweet goodness to it as well, right?
I know that well, Karden, and I will just say that even having your grief witness, like you gave me the honor of witnessing your grief today. And I hold that as one of the biggest honors that you could have for anyone. And not having to say anything, like I'm not trying to calm your grief or get rid of it. I'm literally just here to let you know I'm witnessing. And when we witness, it means it's real, it's valid, and it means something. So we make meaning in the process of grieving. And I think that, that's where the healing happens, is sitting with someone. You said space is how, there's no space for grief. Wait, well, what if we made space? How different might that be for everyone, just in this community? It's actually why I actually hold a monthly live grief class.
Yeah.
And it really is with the intention of holding space and grieving together. Like your grief means something, your mom means something, your experience means something. And just because they're gone, it doesn't mean that they're not very much alive in a different way, right? There's this
Yeah.
relationship that's still there, and parts of you may not be ready to go there yet, or parts of you might be totally okay with where you're at, right? We don't need to judge or even analyze it. It's just a matter of, you know, how would it feel to have your grief witnessed? And like you got a little taste of that today.
Yes.
And that's like just, so courageous of you to show up on here and to open your heart up and to just show how real this is grief is not something we brain retrain away.
No. Nor
No,
should we.
no, it is something that becomes integrated over time, and it's a part of us. It's not meant to disappear. And you're just a beautiful example of how you've carried your grief with you and built a life with it. You've moved with it. lived with it, lived a full life, and you're still getting to know it. And there's
Yeah.
no rush, and that's the beautiful part of it. And that's how I see it is when we're ready, those layers will surface. When we have the container, the space, the permission,
Yeah.
right? So thank you so much for just sharing that moment with us.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe even after I tell my clients too is, can you make a grief session for yourself?
Right.
Like make dedicated time and space for grief.
Yeah. And I think,
And
I just on that practical side is you can't rush it. It will happen when it's ready. But that was, we were kind of like threading through there, um, space, people, because you're not supposed to grieve alone.
yeah,
And so we were talking about power, right? You need to develop safety around it. So a little bit of personal power, but then also like what the space does, what the community does for you, especially if they know how to. That's another thing. Like I talked with the Shiva thing, like you know, even the people that were with me didn't know how to hold space for grieving, right? Because we're so ignorant of it. But when you're with people that know how to hold space for grieving, they lend you the power, right?
yes,
They lend you
love
the
that.
collective
Yeah.
containment to go into the place that's so scary, but also so vulnerable. Like, here's another thing you have to remember: when you're in an actual full state of grief, you're probably in the most defenseless biological state you
Yep.
could possibly be in as an adult, right? In every way. Like uh it's kind of like having your belly up like a dog, right? It's the most vulnerable thing. And so you can even make sense on a biological level, speaking of physics, like the only place I'm ever going to do this is surrounded by human beings that I trust, that know how to hold the space. And if we get attacked during this, they'll protect me,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
that level of safety.
Yes. That's so true, right? Is borrowing that strength, like you said, the power and having someone hold it with you,
Yeah.
right? It's like knowing you don't need to hold this all by yourself.
Mm.
Like I'm going to sit with you in this. And I think that's been the most comforting thing to me
Mm.
in the grief of the chronic illness and the grief of the traumatic loss of my dad, just under 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So I feel you, and my heart, my grieving heart,
Mm.
knows yours, and it's just there to connect with you, and thank you just for
Thank you.
allowing me to witness that today, and those watching. And I think a vulnerable and powerful moment, right?
Hmm.
And so we
And
have
so now let's proceed back to the academic, intellectual, and
yeah.
non-feeling space.
Yeah. Oh man, I could talk with you for hours, Karden.
Mm.
You're just so special and brilliant, and I've
Oh,
learned
sorry. There
so
was
much from you.
I'm sorry. I am interrupting you because I did
Yeah.
want to add one more important piece, because it was really about like grief and the chronic illness journey as well. Is that uh, if you're not making progress,
Mm,
if you're stuck, um, and why the space that you're talking about is so important, Vanessa, guys. Grief, sadness, and then this other bit that I've gotten into, which I've actually been doing more work with lately, that's moving me closer to grief, is annihilation, which is the physical experience of neglect from family, right? So like
yes.
this feeling of annihilation. I can't speak to it more than that. That these three primary internal emotional somatic experiences of sadness, grief, and annihilation are the primary threats that all of your dysregulation, from your rage to your fear to your overthinking, to your symptoms. We look externally at our life to see all these what we think is dysregulating us, right? And that's a component. But when you've worked really well with so many places, the final bosses that you're not dealing with, that you don't feel safe around, that you haven't had, that you haven't engaged, even again, you don't think they're there because of that iron sarcophagus,
Yeah.
right? Most of you don't even think you're angry. Okay. I don't get angry.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Every emotion that you do not have fluent relationship with is one that's dysregulating you.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I'm a
Right?
big proponent of that. I always say if you're bypassing your grief, you're bypassing your healing in some way.
You
And
are.
and I just love that you kind of reaffirm that, that these things within us that we haven't built safety with that we're bypassing can be what's keeping us stuck,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
That's
Yep.
amazing. Yeah,
Yep.
brilliant.
So I just wanted to make sure we said that.
Yes, thank you. And you know what? I have one more question for you. Since this is a question that I always get is people are asking okay, what would you say to someone who thinks their mind, body, or TMS isn't really TMS? Meaning they've done all the tests, that even some, they may come, we know with certain diagnoses and labels, right? But for all intents and purposes, the evidence all points to mind, body. What would you say to someone who's like, that doesn't apply to me? Maybe that, the mind body work helps them. It's not me, I'm different. What would you say to
Mm.
that?
You can lead a horse to water.
Can't make it drink, yeah.
You can't make it drink. And one of the things that one of my personal growth edges has been releasing attachment to that question that you just asked,
Mhm.
releasing
Oh,
responsibility
I love that.
for that
Yes.
question you just asked. Like, if I have found that there has been a 100% inverse relationship between me trying to help basically convince. I'm just it's
Yep,
because it is convincing,
it
right?
is.
There's a 100% inverse relationship between me convincing and someone accepting when it comes to this work.
Yeah.
And so I don't, right?
Yeah.
Um, it has to be, it's always your my contribution to someone getting it. So here's the right. When people are ready to get it and they're already listening, those are
Yeah.
my people and they're the ones listening and consuming my content and helping them further down. But if they're in the pre-phase, you know, my contribution is passive. It is I put out my content.
Yep.
I write my book. We pass these things along to them, but they have to internally acquire the aha moment. It
Mm,
cannot be given to them. In the same way that we say we can't do this work to you, right? Even the people who are now into the work, we say we can't do this work to you. You must do it to yourself, right? We can educate you, show you, guide you, train you, troubleshoot with you, hold you, support you, be with you, but I cannot do it for you. And so, yeah, that internal aha moment that you had with, that I had with Sarno, whatever got you to DNR Sarno, that I can try to create fertile ground for that,
yes.
but I don't convince anymore.
Okay. I love that. That's a sense of freedom there, right? Is I, and again, I call myself a guide. I always say, I
Yeah.
guide you. I can't do the work for you and I can't care more than you do, right? I can't
Yeah.
put more effort than you, but I'm going to guide you. And a part of you is listening. That's what I always say.
Yeah.
You may not get it yet, but a part of you is listening.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess if this person's somewhat like if like again if we were to modify the question slightly and say this is a person who's on the fence,
Hmm.
I would go with, hey Bob, I'd say literally what I just Bob, I've learned that I cannot convince anyone to do this shit. Um, what I can say is that uh uh how do I put this? I have an expression which is I refuse to be the cause of my own suffering.
Mm,
right? And right now, you have a lot of evidence that it points in this direction. You currently aren't taking action on it because you don't believe it. But who cares? Why not just do it anyway and see what happens?
yeah. I love this.
Right.
Like, what have you got to lose at this point? Right. And I always reiterate there's nothing so special about you that the same principles that have helped thousands upon thousands can't help you.
Yeah, it's true. And again, we just have to we have to keep doing our work. We have to keep putting it out there. Obviously, the movement is growing. The popular awareness is
Yes.
growing. This is one of the silver linings of social media, right? Um, it's the effect of, the books that have come before ours, Bessel's and Peter Levine's and Dick Schwartz, and we could keep going. They
Yeah.
are, all of these things change the collective mentality
Yeah.
and make it more accessible and to people. And so that's a strategy I take.
Oh, I love that. I love everything about you, Karden, and I'm so
Same.
grateful that we made this work and that you came on here. As I said before, I could talk to you for hours
We'll
because
do this again.
yeah,
We'll
I
do
would
this
love
again.
that. I would love
Yeah.
that. So I just really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you handed out a hope rope today, so those listening can grab on. And for those who are listening, please follow Karden on Instagram. Get his book. Like, just what are you waiting for? And if you're interested in amazing brain retraining slash mind body somatic, it has everything, a holistic program that's comprehensive that I personally trust. Check out the Heal program by SOMIA International, which is Karden and Jen's baby. Thank you again for being here. It was an absolute honor and pleasure.
Same, Vanessa. It was a delight. Thank you.